Hey, psst. Are you interviewing for a role? Well, I have some secrets to tell you. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere. Actually, while you're waiting, hit the like button and comment down there.
What's up, SC Nation? Welcome back to another video. We're talking about interview tips. Interview seems to be a hot topic. A lot of people are finding a hard time. I'm getting a lot of messages from people being found redundant, even though they're excelling at their job. Kind of sucks, but this is what happens sometimes. So I want to share some secrets that will help you in your interview process. Not to how to get to an interview, but while you're in an interview, some things that you should do that would help you improve your chances and get a job. Number one, turn every interview into a conversation. I witnessed this quite a bit, where an interviewee would sit across the virtual or physical table from the interviewer, and we just sit there and listen to the interviewer asking questions, question after question, where the interviewee would answer these questions. And that's the way it goes. And towards the last 10 minutes, like, hey, do you have any questions for me? And the interviewee would say, oh, of course I have some questions for you. I have them prepared. But usually there isn't enough time to ask all the questions that you should be asking. If you're looking for a list, let me know. I can create one. I already have the list that I usually use, that I share with my clients. So let me know if you want that. I can share that with you. If there is a question, especially behavioral questions, how do you deal with this? How do you deal with a sales cycle? Any question that's not technical, that's not black and white, where you answer, you do this, this, and that. Anything that has an opinion attached to it, you can turn that into a question of your own. For example, hey, Ramsey, how do you shorten the sales cycle? Mr. Interviewer or Mrs. Interviewer, this is what I would do to shorten the sales cycle. I will do A, B, then C. This is what I've done in the past, etc. Actually, out of curiosity, when I'm done answering my question, out of curiosity, how do you train your SEs to shorten the sales cycle? And now you just ask your own question. It's a question that's important. It's a question to see how they train their SEs. It's a question to see how long their sales cycle are. Pretty much for every question that they ask, you can turn it into your own question after you answer the question. Anyways, that being said, you're gonna have to use your judgment. When to ask a question, when to just wait for the next question. Because one, you never answer a question with a question. If they ask you a question, you answer it, and then you move on with your own question, or you wait for them to ask the next question. But also, what are some of the important questions that you want to know about sales engineering? And when can you sprinkle those in and start a conversation versus just being interrogated? If it's interrogation, it's a short interview. If it's a conversation, it will be a long interview. Number two is show emotion. When you're talking about something that excites you, or you're happy about, or it's an accomplishment that you've done, show that emotion. It's very hard to do, especially over Zoom. If you're tired, if you didn't sleep well, but you're gonna have to learn how to do it. I've been learning to show emotion. It's kind of like acting. And when I'm excited, I try to show that I'm excited. If anyone's ever done a driving test and they know that they have to look at the mirror, and if they just move their eyes, like, they will know if anybody's there, but the proctor wants to see you do the movements. We're just making it easier for the proctor to see that we know what we're doing. And we want our interviewer to understand exactly how we're feeling in certain situations. So we show emotion. Simplest way to do that, if it's something that you're excited about, lean forward. You can also speak faster. If there's some, like, if you want to sound thoughtful, if there's something you're thinking about, you slow down. You think about what you're going to say. You don't have to always speak in the same speed or the same tone. Obviously, the more you change your tone, the better it is for the interviewer to understand what you're trying to say. Number three, be proud of what you've done. Sometimes we are not overly impressed with our own accomplishments or our own actions. We seem to think that, yeah, that's part of the job. But even if it is the case, when we're talking to the hiring manager or the teammate, and they're asking us about something that we're proud of, something that we've accomplished, how we've handled situations, we have to show that we're proud of the things that we've done. Because if you're not proud of the things you've done, it kind of implies that you haven't done really anything impressive or to be proud of. You're just doing the job. And if that's the case, you don't really have anything that differentiates you from the next person who just does the job. So we have to be proud of anything that we've done. The fact that I can wake up early enough to take my kids to school, it's something that every parent does. But if I'm proud of it, It shows that I'm happy at least about doing that. It's not something that's impressive by any means, but at least I can show that I'm happy about doing something, even if it's a minuscule thing. The problem is most people underestimate the value of what they've done. I was talking to a microbiologist. I think I'll be using that example later. I talked to a lot of people where they've done stuff in their life and they just don't seem to be overly impressed with their lives. Like, they came to the US or Canada or anywhere in the world as teenagers. They didn't know the language. They had to learn the language. They graduated university. They studied science or something. And these are all accomplishments, right? I know there are a lot of immigrants who do that, but still, these are accomplishments. Just because another person has a similar accomplishments doesn't take away from your own. So be proud of the things that you've done in your life. More importantly, show that you're proud of the things that you've done in your life. Number 4, try to understand what the interviewer is looking for. Interviewers ask questions all the time. I was looking for my internship and I did a bunch of interviews, one of which was with RIM, Research in Motion, the makers of the BlackBerry phone. That was back in 2007. It was still a big company in Canada. Throughout the interview, I was killing it. I was making them laugh, joking around. They were happy with me, happy with my technical experience. And then they asked me the question, when you're going to buy a phone, what do you look for? They're looking to see if I care about phones. They're looking to see if I love phones, if I'm excited about them, if there are specific features that I enjoy, that I like. And my response was, it makes calls. And that was true. For me, I don't really care about phones. I just needed a phone that makes calls. But for someone who's trying to build a phone, build a smartphone, something with email, something with a bunch of other stuff, they really wanted someone who cared about what the phone looked like, was an early adopter. It probably wasn't a good fit for me anyways. If I even sat for a second to think about why are they asking me that question, I would have known the right answer to it. Even though I don't 100% agree with, I mean, I said it as a joke, hey, it makes calls. But I could have answered it differently. I could have answered it better. There are some things I care about that I could have shared. But no, I was too busy making a joke and I never heard back from them again. And I see a lot of SEs or a lot of people during interviews do something similar where we ask a question. We're looking to understand how they think or how they do things. We're looking to see if they have specific characteristics like curiosity, self-awareness, and all these things. When you're interviewing, you have to know that they're looking for these qualities in an SE. So how can I highlight these qualities in myself for them? Obviously, never lie. You'll always be found out. It doesn't feel good anyways to lie because now you have to track all the lies, and for a whole bunch of reasons, you shouldn't lie. We can always answer truthfully in a way that the interviewer wants to hear. If we just think for a second, what are they trying to find out through this question? It's not always straightforward. Number 5, modify the interviewer's question on occasion. Big caveat here is on occasion. If they ask me 10 questions and there's one question that I feel like I should modify, I will do that. For example, I was once asked in an interview, how do you handle if you had 3 customers angry at you all at the same time and you're working on something? And I've never had that situation. I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to make up anything. So that's what I said. I've never had 3 customers angry at me at the same time. Luckily, I've been able to manage that. But I've had one customer angry at me so much that it felt like 3. And I went through how I handled that situation. So I didn't specifically answer their question, but I answered the next best question for them to highlight what they're trying to find out. How I manage the situation? How do I prioritize? How do I execute my plan to alleviate the situation? That goes back to the previous question. How do you handle if you had 3 customers angry at you all at the same time? And what are they trying to find out? If you don't have an answer that's specific to them, come up with a different situation that highlights the same skills. I've had a client where we did a mock interview, which we do as part of the SE hotline, by the way. Check it out. She was asked, what app are you playing with today? Are you trying to learn? And in the end, she said, well, I am on Udemy trying to learn Python. And that could have been the answer from the get-go. It's not necessarily an app. It's not Salesforce. But the reason behind the question is to look at curiosity, the willingness to learn, how actually she goes about learning, what she's accomplished, and if she's actually learned something. So the answer could have easily been, well, I am actually hung up on Udemy. I love Udemy. I'm on there all the time. I've been learning a lot of Python these days. These are the projects that I'm looking at right now. So that could have been a much better answer than saying, I don't know, I'm not learning anything. I don't play with apps. And that was kind of the question that was given. We talked about it. You could have just went straight to Python. modify the question a bit. If it's not an app, it's a program that you're working on. Similar, but not necessarily she's answering the essence behind the question and not necessarily the question itself. You can also ask for permission to say like, hey, I didn't have that situation. I have that situation. Is it okay if I tell you about that if you're uncomfortable? Number 6, take notes. Lots of notes. I've said this many times. After the call, always send your meeting notes. How can you send your meeting notes if you actually didn't take notes during the call? Also, for me personally, it helps me listen better. When I'm writing stuff down as someone is talking, it also makes me think about questions like, what did they mean by that? What are they saying here? And that way I can follow up with them as I'm talking. Like, okay, you mentioned this. I refer back to my notes. What did you mean by that? You know, you can actually expand the conversation, going back to the first one, make it a conversation. Another thing I use the notes for is to hear what words that the interviewer is emphasizing. What is important for them? And that way I can underline it. And while I'm talking, while I'm answering my own questions, I can use their own words in my answers. We always talk about, when we talk about sales engineering, is don't use acronyms. It's always better to use the customer's words. Like if their customer has their own environment, their own terminology, try to use those so that they understand it. Same thing with an interview. We use whatever terminology that the interviewer is using. And it could be different from one interview to the next, even within the same company. Number 7, show your research. I've talked to a few SE managers throughout my career. And although I thought it was common knowledge, a lot of SE managers complain that when they're about to interview someone, they find out in some cases that the interviewee never downloaded the freemium. This is something I mentioned in a previous video. Always download the freemium. If it doesn't exist, watch YouTube videos, download white papers, look at data sheets, try to understand them and their business. And I'm surprised how many people don't do that. Some people do that. The problem is they don't know how to talk about it during the interview, or they just forget to mention it. If they're not asked, like, what do you know about the company? They never mention they did all this research. But they could easily mention stuff like that. Like, for example, the question that was asked, like, what app are you playing with these days? Now, the interviewer that was asking the question, they have a freemium on their own website. And the easiest answer was, oh, your software, I've actually downloaded that in preparation for this call, and I'm loving playing with it. There are many ways to integrate the research into your conversations. For example, if someone asks you about, what do you like a product? Throughout your research, you saw something about the CEO talking about the product, loving the product, whatever it is, or an SE lead doing a demo. You can talk about those, mention the research that you've done. Have pre-planned ways to actually mention that you've done your research. Number 8, don't be negative about your experiences. People get laid off. People have been harassed on the job. People have been bullied. Things happen. Even though it's not a good thing to go through, when you're talking to the next company, it's very hard to explain how you were bullied or how you were harassed, anything like that. It's so hard in a 30-minute interview or an hour-long interview to highlight how you were right and the other people were wrong. And then they wouldn't know if that's true or not. They only heard one side of the story. Even though it's a bad situation, no one wants to go through that. When you're talking about your previous experiences, even if they were negative, try to turn them into positives. Not necessarily say good things about the company. You don't have to. You can say like, oh, it was a challenge. I didn't have a good time. This is what happened, but this is what I learned from it, right? These are the positive things that I got from doing all that. And that changes, one, it changes your mindset, changes your tone when talking about the company that you worked for. Nobody wants to hear you bash your previous company. So having a positive spin to it is always good. Showing that you learned from challenges is a positive thing. Number 9, highlight your strengths. Most SE managers are looking for a set of skills, set of characteristics from the individual that they're interviewing. SEs who are doing the interviews as well are looking for something from their potential colleague. VPs of sales, VPs of sales engineering, they're all looking for specific characteristics from the interviewee. And it's your job to find out what those characteristics are. In most cases, they're similar. They're self-awareness, curiosity, ability to work in a team, ability to work on their own. But you can always find out. You can ask the question throughout the conversation, like, hey, what are you looking for in an SE? And then write it down, take the note, and highlight your strengths in that lens. If they mention, I'm looking for someone who's curious, then talk about the things that you've been curious about and how you've learned, how you've done new things. Talk about how you've been curious about the customers, if that's more your curiosity type than it is to break down a computer, for example, and put it back together. Find whatever the hiring manager, the team is looking for, and frame your strengths based on that. Make sure that they know this is what I'm strong at. You're hired for your strengths, really. No one's hired for their weaknesses. So find a way to highlight your strengths. Number 10, never leave without next steps. It's common in every sales meeting that when you leave a call, you leave with next steps. If it's, hey, let's sync up in 6 months, that's not really a good call. But if there's a clear action plan going forward, that's a good thing. The reason I say never leave without next steps figured out, for multiple reasons. One, you want to know, generally speaking, hiring managers will tell you then and there, or the team will tell you then and there, if they like you and if they're going to push you forward to the next one. The next thing is, you should know when you're going to need to follow up. So if they tell you you're going to hear back from us next week, let's say it's Tuesday today, and they say, well, you'll hear back from us next week. By next Tuesday, I'm sending another email saying like, hey, you mentioned I'm going to hear back from you today. Just wanted to follow up, see how things are going. And I usually let people know, like, hey, if I don't hear back from you by Tuesday, you will get an email from me. I don't have a problem with that. If that's your style as well, great. If not, then just follow up. I always find it easier to follow up when I let someone know what I'm about to do. Right? It's not coming out of the blue. I've already set the expectation. So for me, it's easier. You do you. But in the end, make sure you know what the next steps are. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think it's useful, make sure you like. Here's a bonus one. Take note of the objections. You're probably not going to get the job from the first interview process or the second. You could take a few interviews where you practice and you get the kinks out to actually get a job and do well on an interview process. But throughout these interviews, try to hear what objections that the people that you're interviewing with will share about you. If you don't have the experience, if they're looking for customer-facing experience, if you don't have the technical experience, so that when next time you meet somebody else and they have the same objection, you can find ways to alleviate their concerns. Generally speaking, some companies want exact knowledge in a specific technology to get the job. Fair. Some don't. Some want to see that you can learn something or another. So if they're objecting about you not knowing the technology, but you can still show that you can learn, that you've learned in the past on your own, that will alleviate some concern and reduce risk from the team that's going to say yes. Going back to the microbiologist example, he did some interviews, and one objection, or some of the objections that he's had, is he doesn't have any customer experience. But throughout the conversation with him, I had to dig in deep to find out that he was sent by his own management to talk to the higher ups within his own company to explain stuff to them, because he can speak science with the users and he can also talk about business value and technical value and why they're doing certain things. But he never mentioned that on the interview. I had to ask him what was the objection. He didn't actually remember. He had to dig deep in his mind to remember what the objection was. And then we had to come up with a solution. So now, next time he's in a meeting, in an interview, if they have the same objection, he actually has an answer for that. And now it could be a different objection. If that's the case, take note of that, prepare for the next call. It comes with practice. Everything comes with practice. And the more objections you see, the more you can handle. So that's why I say interview with any company that will interview you, just so you can practice and learn and hear the objections, so you're ready for the company that you actually want to work for. So these are 10+1 tips for interviews. Not all of you watching this video are subscribed currently. So if you're not subscribed, I would appreciate if you do. It will help the channel, let people know this is a legitimate channel where I provide good advice to people like yourself. So like, share, subscribe, and do all the usual stuff. And then get back to work. Peace.